Thank you. Joining me live for more on this, Zionist Federation of Australia President Jeremy Leibler. Thank you for your time. What was your reaction to this? There has been a lot of Hamas so-called training exercises in these areas, but seemingly not seen as a threat. Did it take you by surprise?
Well, clearly these attacks took everybody by surprise. It took the IDF by surprise, it took the Israeli people by surprise, and the whole global community. The only way I can describe it at the moment is an overwhelming sense of grief. To put this into perspective, the number of people killed in Israel in the last 48 hours, from children, women, children, soldiers, innocents, some of them in their beds, some of them at a music festival, still waking up in the morning, exceeds the total number of people killed in entire conflicts that have spanned over many years, the Second Lebanon War or the Second Intifada. This is the largest number of Jewish people murdered on any day since the Holocaust.
Framing it like that certainly, it adds to the impetus of what happened here. What about the Israeli government? There has been some division within it, and particularly some of the moves that Prime Minister Netanyahu has made. Should there be questions around whether that contributed to some sort of intelligence failure here?
Look, there'll be a time, no doubt, in Israel. You will not find a population more critical of themselves than Israel, where they have a robust democracy and free press. And I'm sure a time will come in the future for a proper inquiry as to what led to what clearly looks like an intelligence failure. But today, the people of Israel are behind the government. There are talks of a government of national unity. Most global Western democracies are fully in support of Israel's right to defend itself, including Prime Minister Albanese and the opposition leader Peter Dutton. And I think everyone's focus now is on rescuing and securing the release of hostages that are being held captive in Gaza. These are children, women from the age of 2 that were plucked from their houses and taken over the border. This is a war crime. There's only one way to describe this. And seeing images on the television screen just now of people here in Australia, in Sydney, celebrating the deaths of innocent Jewish people is indeed reminiscent of the Holocaust. And I don't make those comparisons lightly. But Tom, I'll tell you one thing. There is one difference today compared to 1939. Today there is a state of Israel. The Jewish people are not defenceless, and Israel will secure and ensure the safety of its citizens.
Do we need to be cautious about the comparison you just made there? I mean, there's been widespread condemnation of this so-called celebration of what are crimes and deaths as well. But this is also a conflict in which we've seen Palestinians killed, hundreds of Palestinians are killed each year as well. So to equate it to a time when the Jewish people were gradually over many years suppressed, then targeted, then taken for slaughter, frankly. I mean, do you need to be cautious about evoking that comparison?
Well, when you see images of children, women shot at point blank, when you see terrorists intentionally targeting civilians, capturing them in order to trade or effect psychological warfare, it's very difficult to form any other view. Of course, there are differences here, but predominantly because there is a state of Israel. And I think we need to be very, very careful about falling down this pathway of moral equivalence. Yes, there have been Palestinian deaths, and any deaths on the Palestinian side or Israeli side are a tragedy. There is fundamentally a difference between those terrorists who target innocent civilians. Let's remember, Hamas is a designated terrorist organisation, designated by Australia, by the United States. There is a big difference to the inevitable and sad death of innocents in the context of war when they are not being targeted. The IDF is going to need to respond to these attacks. There are over 700 Israelis that have been murdered in the last 48 hours, over 100 hostages being held in Gaza. Sadly, innocent people, innocent Palestinians will die, given the nature of Gaza, the fact that Hamas store their weapons in the basements of hospitals and their leaders hide underground while putting civilians above them. However, to compare that to the intentional murder of civilians is not appropriate.
The situation right now for how Israelis will be feeling, is there a sense that, and without this being seen to sort of cave to what these attacks are, but if people are feeling less safe, that some sort of different approach is needed, obviously by both sides, but including from Israel, on the situation in Gaza, the extent to which that population doesn't have much hope right now, that if a population has no hope, that maybe these attacks will continue. So a different approach might be needed, in particular from the Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Well, I think the realisation, frankly, that the world has had after seeing the barbarity of these events is that you cannot make peace with people who don't accept your right to exist and don't respect basic human life. When ISIS were releasing videos of the beheadings of journalists and innocent people in Syria, I don't recall anyone talking for a change of approach by the allies, by the US government in relation to ISIS. When the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan and started limiting the rights of movement of women and limited basically any sort of freedom of speech or expression, I don't see anyone calling for the United States or Australia to change its approach, right? What's clear is that Hamas is a genocidal terrorist organisation, and I think both the Israelis and most Western countries have realised they need to be removed from power. Unfortunately, Palestinian citizens, Palestinians in Gaza are suffering, and they are suffering as a result of being under the control of a genocidal terrorist organisation.
Got to leave it there. Jeremy Leibler, thanks for your time.
Thank you.